Hello. So, we once again reach one of those weird points in time when there is just nothing out. There's nothing out there, and the stuff that is out there either is not stuff I'm interested in or just, even with my love of trying new things and getting out and seeing movies I wouldn't otherwise see, there's just nothing out there that makes me go, okay, I've got to get off the couch for that. Now, does that mean I'm not going to do a review this week? I don't know. I might get so bored I just have to go check something out, but it doesn't look like it. So I'm going to do like I did last year when this happened. Last year I did an editorial, how I would have made the Power Ranger sequels had they done them. So this year for an editorial, I've had a couple people ask me if I'm ever going to do classic movie reviews or, review older films. And I've thought about it. And I kind of put it out there on Facebook yesterday. And one friend of mine, Emily, so this is for you, Emily, she came up with two suggestions. She had a whole list of them, but she wanted me to do any Audrey Hepburn movie. And she also suggested doing, originals versus remakes. So I've decided to kind of combine those two. And the movie or movies I want to talk about here is a movie that people might not have heard of, or they've heard about it in passing. It's called Sabrina. And there are two versions of this. There's the 1954 version of the film, which starred Audrey Hepburn, Humphrey Bogart, and William Holden. And then there's a 1994 or 95 version, I can't remember exactly, which starred Julia Ormond, Harrison Ford, and Greg Kinnear. And both these movies are very charming, and I really enjoy them. But, there's some stark differences. So I kind of want to take some time and just talk about these two films and, do a little compare and contrast. So this isn't going to be a versus thing as in trying to figure out which one's better. It's more just kind of a compare and contrast. Again, the teacher talk. Compare and contrast these two. So, I think both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses. So I just want to talk about them. So first, sing along if you know the words. If you haven't heard of this movie, so Sabrina is based on a play called Sabrina Fair. And the movies are very loosely based on it. And I say very loosely because I've read the play, and the character names are the same, and the basic plot is the same, but the characterizations are very different. So if you haven't heard of it, here's kind of the blanket plot of both movies. So there's this very rich family by the name of Larrabee in New York or Long Island. And the other family members vary depending on the version of the film, but the constant is there's Linus Larrabee, who is the Humphrey Bogart / Harrison Ford role, and he's the stuffy, business-obsessed, workaholic. And then there's the younger brother, this is the William Holden, Craig Kinnear part, David Larrabee, who is the freewheeling, playboy, different girl every day type guy. So the Larrabee family are very, very, very rich, and they stress that in both films, just how rich these people are. They own everything, they've got everything. I mean, the beginning of both films is basically a voiceover detailing just how extravagant their mansion is. So now that's important because our main character, Sabrina, is the daughter of the chauffeur for the Larrabees. She's the chauffeur's daughter. And more than that, she is head over heels in love with David Larrabee, the younger brother. She's watched him all her life. They always have these big extravagant parties, and she's always watched them from the tree, and she's watched him go off with all these different girls, and so on and so forth. So, for various reasons, depending on which version of the film you're watching, Sabrina is in her late teens, give or take, and her father sends her to Paris. In the 54 version, she goes to a cooking school. In the 95 version, she goes to be an intern at a fashion magazine and learn photography and whatnot. So either way, she goes away, and one, to get an education, and two, her father's hoping to get her away from David Larrabee and, have her, get over him. So while she's gone, and it's very unclear in both versions of the film, like how long she's actually gone, if it's years or months. She definitely seems to age a few years between when she goes and when she comes back, but it's very unclear. But anyway, while she's gone, David Larrabee ends up getting engaged to the daughter of one of Linus's business associates. And Linus, the Harrison Ford, Humphrey Bogart character, is really pushing for the wedding, because if David marries this girl, then that's going to make a big merger between the two companies. Long story short. So David, because he's a free-willing guy, he doesn't want to be pushed into marriage, but he's kind of being forced to, so he's like, And so everything's being planned, this wedding's being planned, and that's when Sabrina comes back. And Sabrina has grown up in Paris. She's become a woman. She's not the little girl anymore. And of course, David takes one look at her, and it should be noted, I didn't say this before, he never noticed her before. He kind of noticed, oh, hi, Sabrina, and that's kind of it. But she comes back, David instantly notices her, instantly falls in love with her, and is threatening to throw this whole merger deal into upheaval. Over the course of like one night, he's doing all this. Linus finds a very humorous way to get David out of the way, and Linus steps in to kind of start to fake romance Sabrina to try to get her to fall out of love with David and fall into love with him. His plan being to then break up with her. She'll be so heartbroken, she'll run back to Paris, and they wanted to deal with it. But, as is the case with romantic comedies, during the course of the fake seduction, she actually is seducing him. He is falling in love with her as this goes on. And so, a little bit of a convoluted plot when you get right down to it, but a very charming story. So, let's kind of talk about the two versions and where they differ, and, for the better, for the worse. So, cop up front. Interesting. Sorry, just trying. This is the problem with doing this while I'm driving. You gotta kind of see where things are going. All right, gotta merge. Anyway, so, the 1954 version, the original, I enjoy, but I don't think the mass audience would, because I think you'd enjoy it if you're like me and you're a child of Turner Classic Movies. Then I think you'll enjoy this film. But you have to be a fan of those type of movies, because you have to be able to overlook, sorry about the sun being in people's eyes, you have to kind of overlook a lot of the less sensitive elements of the story, that were kind of modern at the time, but when you're watching it back, it's really kind of an ooh, ah. For instance, when Sabrina, in both films, there's a scene where Sabrina, right the night before she leaves for Paris, she tries to make a play for David, and it doesn't work. Well, in the Audrey Hepburn version, she attempts to kill herself. She locks herself in the garage with all the cars running, and at the time, in the 50s, suicide wasn't funny then, but they were much more willing to go along with the oh silly girl, doing something stupid. And it's something that's very it's very uncomfortable watching that back. In the 94 version, she simply goes to his room and gives this big heartfelt speech, not knowing that it's Linus Larrabee who's in there and not David, so she humiliates herself. But she doesn't try to kill herself, I also feel like the 54 version, it feels a little, the plot is, when you get down to it, it is kind of mean-spirited, but the plot seems more mean-spirited in this one. You know, Bogart, while he's, you know, romancing Sabrina, he tells her certain things. You know, like he tells her that he once loved a girl, and, you know, he's heartbroken without her, and he once, you know, stepped out onto his ledge of his office and kind of looked down at the street and stood there for 3 hours wondering if he should jump. So yeah, a lot of talk of suicide in the original. But here's the thing: you don't know if he's telling her a genuine thing, or if he's just making up stories to, you know, get in good with her. And I know that's kind of what he's supposed to be doing, but what I liked more in the 94 version is that Harrison Ford would tell Julia Ormond some little lies. You know, like, oh, we're going to buy that building and turn it into a halfway house. But when it came to the personal stuff, he was always truthful with her. And the deal that they did with that movie is that the more he was falling in love with her, the more he was exposing. And then they do a little scene afterwards where he'd sit there and kind of go, "Why'd I tell her that?" You know? So I think it was done a lot better in the 94 version. I think just a lot of things were a lot better in the 94 version. For instance, in the 94 version, it's shown that David actually does love his fiancée. And that, you know, and his fiancée is actually a more developed character, even though she's not in it as much. She's a doctor, so she's not just kind of this trust fund brat, you know. So that character is more interesting, and now David's more interesting. Whereas, you know, yeah, in the 54 version, she was just, you know, the trust fund brat. You know, she had no real personality. You know, and again, things like the, you know, where Sabrina is sent. You know, in the original, she goes to a cooking school, you know, because that's what women learned to do back then. But, you know, 94, 95, it was to be an apprentice to a photographer. So that, you know, that was, I think, much better. And what I liked also better about the time she spent in Paris in the 94 version is we see more of her living life. She's not just at the school. In the 54 version, she's always just at the school. That's all we ever see her is just cooking. But in the 94 version, we see that she's gone out. She's having friends. She meets somebody. You know, she goes on a date with somebody. It's implied that she loses her virginity. Now, obviously, things you couldn't do in the 54 version, but what I liked more in the 94 version is that we actually see that she did grow up while she was in Paris. She became a more fully realized and fully developed person. And even though it's all done in a lot of very, you know, quick clips and all that. So I sound like I'm really ditching on the 54 version, and I am a bit, because again, I don't think it's as strong a film as the 94 version. So then why do I like the 54 version? Well, two reasons. Audrey Hepburn, Humphrey Bogart. When you have two of the most charismatic and legendary screen presences ever in one movie, you're going to get some magic. And they worked really well together, and you're mesmerized in any scene they share. And William Holden as well. I know he kind of gets the lower billing, even though he's also an Oscar winner. But, the Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn own the screen when they're on screen together. That's it. There's nothing else you need to know. So therefore, just because of them, and even though, and that's one thing about these movies, is that they're I forget what you call them, a May-December romance, because Sabrina is supposed to be in her early 20s, 22, I think is what they say in the 54 version, and Linus is in his 40s or 50s. You know, so there's a big age disparity. But neither film here's something the 54 film has better over the 94. Just by the way she looked, Audrey Hepburn made the transition from a teenage girl to a young woman much more seamlessly. Like in her early scenes, it's like you can see she looks like, you know, she looks like a 12-year-old, because she always looked like a 12-year-old. But when she comes back, she feels more mature. In the 94 version, Julia Ormond looks just like they do with, you know, here's a frumpy wig and now you're a teenager. You know, that's one of the places that's weaker. So the 54 version has its good parts, and it has some very funny writing and some really snappy dialogue. But I think the 94 version takes everything that the 54 version had, all the good stuff, and it makes it better. There's some really great dialogue in the 94 version. There's some scenes in there I just love and I know by heart. So I don't think you go wrong if you check out either one of these. And I also think I have a soft spot in my heart for this movie, just because I kind of, while I'm not rich, I really sympathize and I really connect with the character of Linus Larrabee. You know, that longtime bachelor that, you know, nobody really thinks much of. You know, he doesn't have much of a personality, or anybody thinks he's not as interesting or as exciting as, you know, the younger, flashier guy, but it turns out he's actually got more going on. So I really like the character. I think Sabrina is one of those films that has kind of fallen out of people's consciousness, either version, and I think that's a shame. I think the 94 version, I'd put it up there with some of the best romantic comedies I've ever seen, and it doesn't rely on a lot of the, you know, more stalker-esque things that other romantic comedies of the period did. And the 54 version just has so much charm and so much personality. It's also, the 54 version is also directed by Billy Wilder, you know, of Sunset Boulevard and Some Like It Hot and all that. So it's got quite the pedigree. So yeah, if you're asking me which one I prefer the 94 version. I just think it's a better, more complete movie. I think the characters are more complete, and I think the story makes more sense in a modern setting. So it's one of the rare instances where I think the remake is actually the superior film to the original. And it's one of those movies I wouldn't mind if they remade it again, because it'd be interesting to see what a new generation would add to it. You know, what their take on the material would be. But you can't go wrong with either film. Again, if you're a fan of old films, you're a fan of old, you know, classic Hollywood and Bogart and Audrey Hepburn, check out Sabrina, because it's just so charming. And again, the lead actors are just so good and so magnetic that you just can't stop watching. But the 94 version, I think, is better. And of course, again, great actors in that one. Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear. And just the writing is snappier, the story's more complete, and the characters are a little fuller. All right. So that's my editorial. I hope you liked this. If people like it, maybe I'll do some more of these. But yeah, so that's my video. So I have to go to work now. So until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.